Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Real Jumpers podcast. I am your host, Turner Thompson, and joining me are a couple of my friends. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
What's up?
Hello.
What's up?
So before we get started, would everyone like to introduce yourselves? We'll start at the top.
Hi, I'm Kemi Liar. I am a cosplayer on social media and aspiring VTuber, but my friends call me Nikki.
What's up? I'm Dom, motion graphics artist turned IT person.
Dennis here, lover of giant robots better than giant monsters.
I will kill you.
I feel like we're in class again and the teacher's asking us to stand up and introduce ourselves.
All right, tell us one interesting thing about yourself.
Damn it, that guy's was really cool. I can't top that.
All right, sorry.
I
Go
can't
on.
say that. That other kid said that.
All right, all
I was
right.
like, I'm copying them.
All right, we're getting a little off track. Sorry. Go ahead.
Alright, I go by Tyrell. I'm just an aspiring voice actor. Here to crack jokes and make fun of the things that Turner's making us watch. Thank you.
All right, and lastly?
Hi, I'm Steven, Steve-O, whatever these guys decide to call me. Don't have any socials yet, but I'm happy to be here.
All right, and my name is Turner Thompson. I am a visual effects artist with a focus in compositing. I love science fiction films. I'm going to be completely honest. They're the main reason that I got into the field in the first place. Namely Godzilla, which is what people will quickly discover from the title. Anyway, so this is a brand new podcast. So what is the point of our podcast? We are going to be watching science fiction films and TV shows, potentially, that are important to us and have influenced our lives. In short, I'm going to force all of my friends to watch the cool movies I grew up with. I'd like to give a shout out to the podcast that inspired me to put this whole thing together. There are shows like Chilluminati, The Adiptus Ridiculous, and Newbie Star Trek are some of the biggest inspirations for me. I figured that these jerkwads can do it, so can I. The goal of our show is to be a lighthearted comedic podcast that will discuss the story of these films, their intended meaning, and what they mean to us, and even how some of these classic visual effects were done. We would like to make a disclaimer that the point of our podcast is to entertain, so if we happen to get anything wrong or mispronounce any names, we are sorry, and we encourage you to do your own research if the films we watch interest you.
Also, please let us know so we can correct ourselves.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
You could just watch them because what we've said has interested you and you generally want to watch it for fun.
Yes. The first movie that we're going to watch is Godzilla, King of the Monsters from 1956. This is the American version of the original classic film, which we do intend to watch at some point, but we wanted to start with the one that most Americans started with in the first place. And going forward, the podcast will be planning to do pretty much all of the Showa Era Godzilla films and possibly some of the Showa Era other monster films such as Rodan and Mothra. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, gear up. We're jumping feet first into the heart of sci-fi. This is Real Jumpers. Now let's drop.
Can I go ahead and open up the first conspiracy that I found out about this movie?
Sure, why not?
So, because we all watched this together, right?
Yes.
All right. And when the movie opens up, you obviously see who, helped produce the movie and bring it over. We're all anime nuts here, so we all remember something called ocean dubbing. That was a thing, right?
Oh, God.
I'm so sorry. So what I'm assuming is this is the company that brought Godzilla over from Japan. So when you see it, it says Trans World Release. I got very interested in this, and I went to look them up because I wanted to see what else they produced. Can somebody help me find this company because they're gone? It's like they never existed.
It's possible that Transworld's not even the biggest one because I've been going through all the films on YouTube and pretty much all of the Showa Era ones have this thing called Janus films in the very beginning, and maybe those are the ones you really want to look into.
Well, it's interesting because you look up Transworld Release on Google and it says that Transworld Productions does exist, but they didn't start making movies until the 1980s. And Godzilla 1954 isn't even on their list of productions. But of course, when you look up any Godzilla movie, especially this one, it comes up as Toei Productions.
I think it's Toho, but yes.
It's possible, and I have no basis for this. They could have just been absorbed by another company, or maybe transitioned or changed their name or something. Because this movie was made in the 50s.
Yeah,
So
That's a long time ago, so it could have changed.
too, and it turns out Transworld Productions, the aforementioned one, got purchased in 2019 by a company called Sunrise Productions.
interesting. Okay. So it's funny that you bring that up because I was about to go into a little bit of historical context for this film. We're not going to do a huge deep dive because this is the American version. We want to save those really deep discussions about the historical context of Gojira, as it's called. But so a little bit of information. The original film was released back in 1954 by a Japanese studio called Toho. And Gojira is considered possibly the most famous, if not one of the most influential kaiju films of all time, which for those who don't know, kaiju in America often refers to a giant monster, while overseas in Japan, kaiju, the word usually means strange beast.
Which is actually something when you were first explaining it.
Yeah.
Was kind of interesting how the word changed throughout, one being the direct translation after Godzilla being released and its subsequent rise throughout the decades effectively changed the meaning of the name.
Yeah, it is weird. It has to do with like how just the word was absorbed by like American culture. I bet if we hunt it down, it's probably someone called a giant monster a kaiju in some localization, and then that just stuck.
Well, that goes back to when I said remember ocean dubbing, because that tended to happen a lot once we saw a lot of Japanese films, even other films from other nations and TV shows. When they came over to America, we had multiple different dubbings and translations of them. So it's probably the same process.
Yeah. So in general, I will keep it simple. The movie Gojira and subsequently Godzilla is a product of the zeitgeist of the Japanese people who are in a post-atomic World War II world. Overall, the film does touch on themes of the hubris of man and the terrible power of the atomic age, witnessed firsthand by the Japanese people. After the release of the film, in 1955, a producer named Edmund Goldman purchased the rights from Toho to make an Americanized version of the 1954 classic. From the very get-go, Toho understood that the film would be heavily edited for Americans, considering that at the time, Americans really didn't care about foreign films. So they had to do a lot of reshoots for this film, which apparently, from what I could find out, all of the additional American footage added to the American version of the movie was done in a day. And I found conflicting sources on this, but if that is true, that's insane. So what was the main thing?
Really gives you kind of perspective, because nowadays it takes half a year to produce a movie.
Yeah, pretty much. It's insane.
Not too simpler.
All right, so
Also, it shows if it was actually done a day.
Yeah. It's also funny, too, because since we live in the year 2024 and we know all we do about movies and visual effects, it's really funny seeing some of these old-timey compositing and double exposure things that they had to do to get things to work.
Definitely got to remind yourself the time period of which the movie came out.
Yeah, my stupid 2024 brain is just like, oh, it looks weird.
There was a certain point of the movie where I couldn't tell the difference between a toy helicopter used for a movie. For a second, I thought it was like a toy helicopter that a child was meant to have dropped.
But it's no different than with us, because when we were kids, we had Disney movies and stuff come out, and we thought the graphics were so awesome at the time, and now we go back and watch our childhood movies, and we're like, what is this?
I mean, that's pretty much like Godzilla, from the research I have done. In Japan, one of their selling points was that their film would be just as good as the Hollywood films. And there's like a little bit of trivia I can add to that later. But all right, anyway, so in order to make the film more Americanized, what they did is they brought in a Canadian actor named Raymond Burr to play an American reporter named Steve Martin, which I'm so sorry, Steve. We're going to say your name a lot.
I did not know he was Canadian.
Can I give my tidbit on this? I'm so proud I figured this out. Okay, for those who don't know, the actor who plays the main character in the 1954 Godzilla, what's his name again?
His character is Steve Martin, but the person is Raymond Burr.
Raymond Burr. Most people will recognize him because after he did Godzilla, he became one of the world's famous TV lawyers as he starred in Perry Mason. And this show and his career as his character actually brought forth, and this doesn't have nothing to do with Godzilla, it's just really cool, brought forth many other crime shows like Law and Order, CSI, and everything. He is known for being one of the best courtroom dramas that exist ever. So he was a really big actor during this time.
Not to give credit to where it deserves, he did a great job, but the entire time, any scene that I see him in, it seems like it's the first, original character that people would make in like a fan fiction or something. So he just stood a little bit out of place.
It really does. It really does seem like America made their own original character for this franchise and just stuck him in wherever he could.
It's also funny. He is like a solid head taller than pretty much anyone else he encounters in the movie.
Everyone.
It just reminds us of what, I used to do all the time, what I still do when I make OC characters, is I just watch the anime and go, yeah, my character could stand there. Oh, I could put her in there.
I also find it hilarious that they do in this movie what they do, several decades later. Like with, after Carrie Fisher passed away, Leia from Star Wars, they pretty much already finished the movie. So they took like old recycled footage of her, and like if you actually look at it, she never like looks at the camera straight on when they do like the CGI of her face, or she's always facing away from the camera, or it's a separate cut altogether.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And they basically do the same thing with Steve in Godzilla. Like whoever he's talking to is always facing away, or it's like a smash cut to Steve delivering his line, and then back to the original.
Yeah. All right, and so that's a little bit of background of the film. And before we get started with the synopsis, I wanted to explain Godzilla as like a concept means a lot to me. When I was very young, there was a time when I had an epiphany when I found out that Godzilla was a guy in a suit. That blew my mind as a kid. Like, I think a lot of people or around that age tend to like, it's not desensitized. I guess the word is like...
It's like looking through the world through a child's eyes. Everything seems so
fantastical.
Yeah, that word.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of times when people find out, like when you're really young, that Godzilla is just a dude in a suit, it kind of ruins it for you, doesn't it, a little bit?
It's kind of like finding out Santa's not real.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of kids, I think, encountered that when they discovered that something like that was the way it was, and it just kind of became less special. To me, it blew my mind. I was like, yo, that means someone made that suit? How did they do that? Wait, if there's a guy in a suit, then that means all these cities he's destroying are like tiny cities. They had to make this. How did they do that?
Legos.
That's pretty much anybody getting into like filmmaking for the first time. It's just like, okay, so how does this actually work? Digs into it a little bit. Oh my god, that's so clever.
Yeah. So I think I can pinpoint the moment when I discovered Godzilla was a guy in a suit was the moment that I was like, I knew what I kind of wanted to do with my life. Like, it definitely waxed and waned in different directions, but I always knew I wanted to be involved in the entertainment industry, and I wanted to know how they did all this cool stuff. I wanted to learn the movie magic.
And look at that, Turner. You got to help with a movie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I did get to work on Barbie. That was a very fun production. So pink. Everything was so pink.
Not just Barbie.
Oh, yeah, I also worked on Mean Girls,
other
and I think the film was called Shirley. Yeah.
Not the original 2003 Mean Girls. You would have been too young for that. It's like a...
Yeah, it was the released one that I think it was this year, possibly last year. I forget exactly.
Yeah,
I think it was this year.
Like a movie, or was it a series? Because I think they did like a reunion thing.
I've worked on a lot of series. I'll forget a lot of it. I'd have to go check my IMDb, but I'm not in the mood for that right now. But yeah, so I love Godzilla. Godzilla is super important to me. Later on, we will be talking about our scores for these films. Completely disregard mine. Mine are completely biased. I love these films. And so all the criticism I will say about these films comes from a place of love. I love Godzilla so much, and I will force my friends to watch all of it.
A great time. A great time.
All right,
I'm
so
just waiting for the first chance I get to talk about mechas.
Hey man,
So don't
giant
blame me,
robots,
Rebecca.
giant monsters have been enemies since the dawn of time. So we're going to get started with a synopsis. At the very beginning of the movie, we open to pure silence, and it's rather eerie. We see logos for Janus Films, Transworld, and Toho, which leads up to this very ominous footsteps in the background, all the way up to Godzilla's iconic roar and the title card, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Ah, such an awesome title. Whoever came up with that did not realize how important it was to brand Godzilla that, because that like set him up for like the rest of his career as like a intellectual property, as this is Godzilla, he is the king of the monsters.
My question is, why would they brand him as that? Because he was the only monster in the movie.
I
So
think
that was one thing I thought about. I'm like, I get it, but considering the time span between
Like the title's awesome, but
how it's weird being the king of monsters when you are at the current moment the only monster.
well, I guess in this movie he's considered a cryptid to some people, like how we view like Bigfoot and everything. So they probably just kind of related to him to like myths and legends of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and the Yeti, and then down here in the South we have the Goat Man. So maybe that's what they were referring to, in a sense.
if I had to guess, and this is with zero research and me just completely pulling it out of nowhere, I think he's called King of the Monsters because at the time he was possibly like one of the biggest movie monsters like ever to be seen on screen. Like previously we had the likes of King Kong, who is essentially about like an elephant or bigger, and then there was the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which I think was called the Ratosaurus or something. That creature was maybe blue whale sized, but like I do believe that in terms of like the zeitgeist of the 50s style sci-fi monsters, Godzilla was the biggest thing that ever like came to screen, and I think that could be
his
it.
movie wasn't the only monster film that came out during that time period.
Previously, King Kong came out a couple years before, and from my research, King Kong is a huge inspiration for, like, in general, to make Godzilla. Another one was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which was done by Ray Harryhausen, I think is his name. Like, a huge influential stop-motion artist.
Oh, wow. Godzilla only came out a year after that.
Oh,
The Beast
really?
from 20,000 Fathoms.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
And that was stop motion. 20,000 that was stop motion, and then this has like puppets and
They actually
googly
wanted
eyes.
to do stop motion originally for Godzilla until Toho sat down and realized how long that would take.
They had a little stop motion.
They had some, yes, but they really wanted the whole. Initially wanted the whole thing to be that. Anyway, so after the title card, we then open to some rather haunting imagery of the aftermath of Tokyo, and we hear the American narrator, who we discover is stuck in rubble, and he talks about the unbelievable devastation that he has just witnessed. We then learn that this narrator, his name is Steve Martin, and he comes from the United World News as a correspondent, and he is incredibly unlucky to be in Japan, August 1954.
All for a layover.
It was a
too.
layover. It was a layover. Cairo.
Yeah,
He just wanted to visit his friend.
yeah.
Like,
He's so unlucky.
I'm like,
place for
in any
that.
case, like no matter where you're going, on what side of the U.S. you're going to, like that, it's one hell of a layover.
Yeah. We made the joke that he was the original Stardust Crusader because he was going to go to Japan and then all the way to Cairo.
I think he mentioned that he was coming from like Los Angeles, so it makes geographical sense.
I guess.
Yeah.
I
It's just-
don't remember him saying anything about LA. All I remember was him say that he had a layover from going over to Cairo for 2 days in Japan. I'm like, wait, what?
We
If he was on the
originally
West
thought that
Coast,
he was
it makes
he was
sense.
stopping. Yeah, we originally thought he was stopping in Cairo on his way to Japan, and we're like,
he says he's there for a social visit too. So the two
Yeah.
2 day layover isn't like
Yeah, the
Doesn't
reason
be
is
bad.
fine. It's just he's super unlucky that his layover was in the exact place that the giant monster is about to F up.
I can't really speak about layovers because on my way to Hawaii, my layover was in Seattle, and that made no sense to me. You had to go up to go down.
All right. So after that, we cut from Steve, who is just stuck in rubble, and he checks the guy who's dead, which we made a joke about, that guy was potentially trying to get him the morning news, and he just didn't make it, which was pretty funny.
Also, that
Mhm.
sorry, that guy just disappears in a later scene.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, later on.
Yeah. So from there, we go back to some original footage where we see the fallout from the attack from last night, where we see hospitals are overwhelmed. Here we learn about one of the main characters, whose name is Emiko, who is the daughter of Japan's top paleontologist, which is a job I wish was more feasible. After this, we find Steve is being carried down a hallway, and I find it interesting that his narration about how awful things have become and all the human suffering he sees is drowning out a very famous audio of a young girl crying for her mother from the original, which I brought up with my friends that this is potentially a form of censorship, because seeing that girl cry is pretty messed up. Like, that child sounds like she is, like, they literally convinced her mom was dead or something.
Messed up for the time, because we've got to admit, over the years, what we do censor and don't censor for TV and movies is definitely different than what it was back then.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I also discovered that, like, this movie was made right around the same time that America was no longer occupying Japan, and they had lifted their censorship laws on them. So it's like, that's why some really messed up imagery is in this movie. But I find it interesting that when it got Americanized, that they seem to subtly kind of push the camera away from some of the more disturbing stuff.
It's not just that. It's this whole tone that I felt throughout the entire movie. It felt more like a World War II propaganda movie. It's kind of like, you remember watching, like, say, Captain America? What was it? That montage scene of him touring around, effectively making, what was it?
Public
plays?
appearances.
Yeah.
Public appearances and stuff like that. Yeah. It felt like that. Anytime that Steve Martin spoke in a way, made it feel more like he was giving a report that this is an ongoing fight, or this is the beginning of something even bigger.
Yeah, he does have that kind of voice. He does sound like almost like that guy from, like, the Clone Wars who was giving the war reports in every episode.
Fucking love that guy.
So we then see that Steve and Emiko meet through a very terrible edit. Like, wow, it was bad. Like, on my multiple rewatches, I'm like, this was a really bad edit.
Also to point out that they gave her a Southern girl voice, a lady's voice.
Yeah,
You know, you can clearly tell that the person they got to dub for Emiko is slightly Southern.
Yeah.
Not to mention that, but also they also have it so they only sometimes will dub over the original Japanese with English, just so that the viewer can understand what's going on at, like, certain crucial moments. But it is so jarring half the time, where it's just like, okay, she's speaking in Japanese for, like, 3 scenes in a row, but then, like, there's something we need to know, so she just suddenly adopts this Southern accent. It's like, wow, what happened?
I'm telling you, it's like it's ocean dubbing.
No, but he's right though. So many times where the movie effectively says, "You know how to speak Japanese? No? Well, good luck." They're gonna say everything. No, but
it really made me want to have Steve there to go, "Hey, what'd they just say? Hey, what'd they just say? I know you're still learning Japanese, but what did they just say?"
I could maybe translate a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's a very interesting discussion we can have about that later. Because, like, there are moments where, like, what they choose to dub and what they choose not to dub sometimes is like, that's really artsy, and other times it's like, that seems dumb. But moving on.
Wait, I have one last thing to say about, what was her name? Emiko, yeah. Emiko, right. She is just, like, the poster child of, like, over-the-top 50s acting.
Oh my god.
Like, we'll get to it later, but oh my god, there are so many times in this film where she'll just, like, hyper overact something, and I'm just like,
There's one of those instances with Steve in the beginning under the rubble, which that was just like the very first thing. Yeah, push up, like, falls back down super dramatically.
It's really funny.
He's just like, Oh my god! It's like, dude,
Well,
that thing
so
doesn't even
the
weigh like
actress
3
you're
pounds.
talking about, Dom, the actress who plays Emiko is named Momoko Koichi,
Okay.
I think.
I'm not saying she had a bad performance or anything. I just
No,
find it
she's
funny.
like, she's been in a good number of Japanese films, from a lot of more Godzilla movies, and I'm pretty sure Turner could have told us that.
They repeat that. You will find that as we go through the series that you will see them reuse a lot of actors and not as the same characters. It's really annoying.
But she has been in a total of, as of IMDb, 53 Japanese films, ranging from 1996 all the way to 1954.
Cool. All right.
So she is a really good actress.
But Turner, you said that they use the same actors for different characters.
Yes, they do.
You mean like what Robert Downey Jr. is doing now?
Well, that's smart because, side tangent, apparently, oh gosh, Dennis can explain it better.
Well,
That's
no,
actually a plot line in Marvel Universe, one of the universes.
That's funny, but we're getting a little
Yeah.
sidetracked. Okay, anyway,
Yeah.
so as Steve and Emiko meet for the first time, we see an interesting point that they will never show the face of the original characters that Steve is interacting with, which is an interesting workaround, but like it becomes obvious really quickly. Anyway, so they start talking, and Steve asks if her father, the paleontologist, is still alive, and she tells him that he is and is currently in a security council meeting. After this, we flash back to see Steve in an airplane talking about his soon-to-be ill-fated layover to Japan to meet an old colleague of his named Dr. Sarazawa, who will be
The
pivotal
evil
to...
scientist.
Hmm?
The evil scientist.
He does look like an evil scientist, but he's actually not evil. He just lost an eye in the war. That's like part of his story.
It's like you first see him and you see that he's wearing an eye patch and the classic evil rubber black gloves.
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
like, evil scientist, and then he does what he does, which we'll get to in a bit. And I'm just going, evil scientist.
We're waiting for
Oh,
James
it's-
Bond to storm in.
Yeah.
Funniest part about that, I think, is because like that trope hadn't really been established yet, because filmmaking was still kind of in its infancy.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, maybe that
Like
didn't
for
have that
someone who's
connotation.
someone.
Maybe he just looked like a war veteran. So he talks about how he was going to Japan to meet his colleague of his named Dr. Sarazawa, who will be very pivotal to the plot later. From there, we transition to one of the most historically allegorical scenes in all of Godzilla history, which we can discuss more in depth when we revisit the original. Needless to say, this entire sequence is a reference to the real-life tragedy of the Lucky Dragon No. 5 boat, a Japanese fishing boat that was affected by a hydrogen bomb test known as the Castle Bravo test. And we can talk more about like how impactful that test was when we go back to the original, but just it was a very, very important, like, it was one of the main reasons why this movie was even made in the first place. Here we see a Japanese boat being attacked, but what appears to be a very bright light and a very famous roar that came up from the depths and basically sets the entire boat on fire. There's a very interesting double exposure shot that they do where you see two... Basically what double exposure is where you shoot footage and then you shoot footage again on top of it using the same reel but looking at something else, and it allows you to kind of composite two images on top of each other. If you don't properly set it up, you can kind of give it like a ghostly, ethereal effect, and this is how a lot of people would often do ghosts in old-timey films. But you can see that like it doesn't properly track, and it's that's just my compositor's eye right there.
I never knew that's how they did that, really?
Yeah, it's you shoot the footage, you take the footage again, and you just shoot it you run it through the machine a second time. It's interesting because the film is still light sensitive; it can still react to it because the raw negatives, if I remember my film, is still sensitive to light, but there are ways you can print the negatives to something else, and those things are not sensitive to light anymore.
Now that you mentioned that, because I mentioned before we started all of this that I used to watch, I still do, watch all those old Hollywood TV shows, The Addams Family, Dick Van Dyke Show, all of those types of shows. Now that you say that, I can recall many times, primarily in The Addams Family, that they did do that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting filming technique that was just the first guy came up with was like, yo, like to all of his buddies or something. So before their
Guys,
boat
come
was
look at this. I did a thing.
So before their boat was completely annihilated, the crew did manage to send out an SOS. However, I would like to point out that the guys manning the the telegram machines, the thing where you go,
Yeah.
Whoever was manning that must have been a ground type, because as soon as the water splashed through the window, he immediately just gives up, man. The guy.
He also gets thrown back, like he was just flashed from. Did anyone else see that? Where the moment the water bursts through, he gets sent back like it was the force pulling him in.
Oh, I didn't see that. I was too busy
Overacting.
talking about how somebody just lit a match on a gasoline-filled ship.
And so
That's what it looked like.
And so as the ship sinks, we then transition back to Steve on the mainland because he has made it back into Japan. While he's going through customs, Steve meets Dr. Sarazawa's assistant, who informs him that the doctor is doing something very important and had to delay before Steve is now ushered away by a bunch of police officers because they need to question him. He says a fun little remark where he's like, is this a clever way of saying I'm under arrest? And they were like, no, you're not under arrest. We just need to ask you some questions. And I thought that was going to go somewhere, but it didn't really. I was expecting like a more like kind of like a drama thing where like he would be, it's like he thinks he's under arrest, so he does all of his reporter ways to like I know my rights and stuff. But no, I never really went anywhere with that.
1954. It's a different era.
It's a different era.
People aren't paranoid.
Yeah.
I have a
I want to know why they, were they asking everybody on that plane questions, or they single out the one white guy, one American.
Yeah. So
I have a whole gripe with that with what's coming next after the interrogation, because oh my god.
Don't worry, we can touch on that. So he's taken away and he is questioned by a interrogator who we find out his name is Tomo, and this guy kind of becomes Steve's constant companion and friend throughout the film. He will be like almost every shot going forward, you will see him and Tomo standing next to each other. He informs Steve that a ship sank earlier that night, the same time that he's playing was in the area. So basically, the Japanese wanted to ask everyone that was on that flight if they saw anything, because they got a weird message talking about how their boat burst into flames, which I'm surprised that they managed to type out bursting into flames, considering how quickly that boat went under.
Listen, different time period. People were doing Morse code as quickly as we do texting nowadays.
You know what? That's understandable. I can see that. I just don't know how to do it myself.
So they were able to get a message out because Mike Wright was 8 ships destroyed, and they automatically found out about it with no survivors.
Oh, they haven't found out about the 8 ships dying yet. I think I have. I have that in my. That's later in the plot. So Steve, being a reporter, asks if he could get the scoop on this story. And being that he is tall and looks important, Tomo just kind of takes him to the situation room where everyone's talking about this. Here we say that this room is just hectic, filled with frightened people looking for answers, and we learn that another ship was just sent out to investigate what happened to the previous one.
And here comes the ongoing thing, to me, even if he's a reporter, the ongoing thing of, you look important, and they just let him into state secrets.
Yeah,
I tell you, it's
it was full on. Say it was hush hush even from the beginning. They're like, "Oh, you look important. Come on, you could probably help us with something."
Yeah,
and they just let him through with everything, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, they're literally just letting him walk through."
Freedom of the press, man.
Yeah. And when they transition to the scene where all these people are hectically trying to figure out what's going on, I did make a note that I find it interesting that they didn't feel the need to subtitle or dub over every single Japanese actor. And this is one of the times where I thought it was interesting, because it's like, this is like from Steve's perspective. He literally doesn't know Japanese very well. So to him, this is an entire room of people speaking a language that he's not too familiar with, and he's very confused. So he's asking his buddy Tomo, like, what's going on? And then that's how they learn that the boat is being sent out to go figure out what happened. Which does lead to a pretty funny scene, at least in the American version. I would love to return back and see if, like, the timing or the presentation of what I'm about to talk about was like way more dramatic, because the way it happens next is that we see this little boat on a miniature set is being sent out into the area, and almost like the instant it goes to the spot where that boat was, it immediately catches on fire. It just sinks instantly.
Somebody lit their cigarette too close to the gas tank. I'm telling you.
Yes.
Well, back then, you were smoking on planes, you were smoking inside, you were smoking in schools.
Well, back then it was literally prescribed by a doctor. This sounds like my lunch break. I gotta go take my medication. I'll be by the gas pump.
Oh yeah.
You sure that's a smart idea? Yeah. Nothing bad will happen. Whoosh.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think Steve is smoking in almost every scene he's in this movie.
Near
I think the actor actually does have a smoking. I think at the time would have been a habit, not an addiction, because when he was filming Perry Mason, he was always smoking. I think it was not a corn pipe. He was always smoking a pipe, I believe.
Yeah, he's got like that Sherlock Holmes style pipe. It looks pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, the aftermath of this boat being sunk, we lead to a scene where we see multiple newsmen who are speaking a bunch of different language. I remember catching some Spanish. I think I heard maybe French or something, but like basically all these news people are going around like, yo, there's some stuff going down in Japan, man. We need to get some people over here. And a quote that I pulled up was 8 ships obliterated by mysterious blinding flash of fire, which is that's kind of scary sounding.
Oh, yeah. Imagine hearing that on the news and just like, especially nowadays, if we see something that we don't know, like everyone just freaks out.
Oh yeah, we just assume it's aliens instantly.
Are you sure? Because you remember when that whole SeaWorld thing happened, we didn't we didn't panic. We just started making fun of it.
Oh, you're talking about Ocean Gate with the
Oh yeah, that thing. Yeah.
SeaWorld thing. You think they went diving looking for Shamu?
Well, there's a whole lot. That entire thing is a can of worms.
That was like as much of a meme that was. It was still a tragedy.
It was a tragedy.
People still died, but memes still flooded in, and that still happens today. Like tragedy happens, but people still joke about it.
I think what Steve was trying to say is like if you scale it up to like an ocean liner that's like ferrying goods from here to China, just goes up in flames, no survivors, no reason. I think like more people would actually flock to that, and everyone would just be like, "What the hell happened?"
Because with Ocean Gate, we knew exactly what happened.
We knew how stupid that was.
Yeah.
Still did it anyways, and now look what happened.
Like the equivalent in Godzilla was just like, okay, 8 ships have literally just bursted into flames under completely mysterious circumstances. Like, is it terrorists? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think some people think it might be like some leftover German U-boats or something. Like, that's a very common, like, I remember that was a huge problem in World War II, where, like, submarines, because that was, like, the dawn of the submarine.
It could also go back to panic because, like you said before, Turner, during this time, and it is actually was in history, that was when hydrogen bomb testing happened, like, fairly frequently. Maybe not frequently, but it was happening.
Yeah. All right. So moving forward, we see a montage of the Japanese just trying to figure out what the heck is happening, and they start seeing some survivors, and they all die of strange burns, which I'd love to see if in the original they call it something else, because I think calling it strange burns is a mild form of censorship to try and like not make it like, oh no, it's not radiation, it's strange burns. Don't feel bad that we nuked the Japanese.
Because it was radiation, wasn't it?
It was, yes, but again, like this movie, it's really hard to not talk about its allegory, and it seems like this movie, like the Americanized version, tries its best at every point to not directly say it out loud, but it is an allegory for, atomic bombs.
Especially, it's one things I noticed of where by doing that they make the camera focus on Steve. They focus directly on him and his narration, and a lot of the shots that we got in the beginning were just him looking around. kind of taking in the environment as he's narrating, and I'm just like, this is weird. Like, this
You
does
know
not
what?
seem right.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I would have liked. I think I prefer strange burns over what the actual medical term for radiation burns is.
Oh, what is that?
It's called radiation dermatitis.
Ooh. Oh, I think I've seen cases of that. It's horrifying. You basically turn into a puddle. It's like
Yeah.
horrifying.
It's kind of. It looks fairly similar to a sunburn, actually.
Oh, that reminds me. There's a reason why Godzilla looks the way he does. His skin is designed to look like radiation burns.
So he's just got dermatitis.
Yeah.
Dude, I have some eczema lotion. I can just lend it to him.
all right, we're getting a little off topic. All right, so after this, we see that people are demanding answers, and no one has any. So the Japanese decide to set up a security meeting where they're inviting top scientists and security officials from all across the country. Here we see Dr. Yamana, the father of Emiko, who was invited to participate, and we learn that Steve coincidentally met him through Dr. Serizawa. However, as we learned before, that Emiko's father was a paleontologist, so my first thought was, why are they inviting a paleontologist?
So we learned that they're inviting all of the top scientists, and we talked about this for a good hour.
Yeah.
When we watched it. Okay, so it's like we're oh my gosh, 8 ships just blew up out of nowhere. People are panicking. We just got done with World War this and everything. Let's get in our physicists and our radiologists and all of these like top nuclear scientists and yeah, let's bring along the paleontologist.
Not just the paleontologist, the astrologist too. And I'm just like, wait a minute, why are they both here?
No, I don't think there is a...
No, we joked about bringing in an astrologist. I had said astrologist instead of physicist.
Yeah.
But it's like all of these like top scientists that are related to nuclear warfare. And then there's like, hi, I'm a dinosaur doctor.
It's really funny because I have two observations about that. Because I love Chilluminati, I know how a conspiracy theory forms, and if the general public knew that a top paleontologist was brought to a meeting about boats sinking, it's like the same as like, imagine in America we learned that some dude got murdered, and they brought in a pathologist, they brought in a detective, they brought in a virologist, and they brought in like an Egyptologist, and then you're like, wait, whoa. Why is there an Egypt? Did a mummy get him? It's like, no, a mummy was not involved. Then why are you bringing the Egyptologist?
Just to cover all bases.
So like,
no, Turner. What would really freak people out is if something happened and they bring in all the scientists, and then they bring in the monster hunters from that show you guys watched.
Oh my god, they brought in the guys from Mount. That'd be so funny. All right, Eddie. The funny thing is that we joke about how he doesn't belong there, and Yamana kind of looks like he doesn't know why he's there either, and everyone is talking to him like he knows what's going on, and he's got this look on his face like, I don't know. So he panics, and like he just, because he's a scientist and he uses his ability called deductive reasoning, he's like, okay, we know a bunch of boats sank in this area. There's an island near this area. Why don't we ask those guys? So
hey, why haven't you guys thought of that first?
Because people are stupid.
Why because they probably brought in like a geographical scientist or whatever that's called. Why didn't that guy bring that up? It was the literal dinosaur doctor that did it. It was like, go here.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. So he recommends that they go interview the people of Odo Island. We then smash cut to a shot of Odo Island where we see the natives find another guy who washes ashore, and they try to like resuscitate him, and unfortunately he dies from strange burns again, which I wonder what was the point of this shot, because that character is never important, and everything we saw here just kind of doesn't matter.
I guess could lead to that we learn that this island does view Godzilla as a classic folklore, so they probably know about the things it could cause because they did the sacrifices at once upon a time. So when they saw this, it was probably a gateway scene in writing to lead to them freaking out over this deity that they once used to worship.
Okay. I guess, I don't know. I chalk it up to bad editing on the American side, and it probably made a lot more sense in the original, which I can't wait we go back to that. So Steve, being tall and important looking, manages to catch a ride to go see the officials visit the island and interview the natives, where he interviews a man with Tomo's help who claims he saw a monster and learns that the people are very superstitious. Later that night, we witness a ceremony where we learn that the people of Odo Island would occasionally sacrifice young women to appease the sea monster, who is named, you guessed it, Cthulhu. Nah, just kidding, it's Godzilla.
Okay, when you watch drama and TV shows and you start getting older, you start to realize that, like, say you're watching something and they zoom in on, like, a pair of scissors, right? Mm-hmm. You automatically know that those scissors are important somehow.
Oh, you're talking about Chekhov's gun.
Yes. Yeah. So what if it was just letting us something similar to that? It's like letting us know that, oh, this is important, you know? So it leads us to believe that, oh, okay, well, now they've probably put 2 and 2 together. Let's start freaking out.
Okay, that's probably...
And let's go pick the nearest virgin to sacrifice to Godzilla.
I think it's more just building suspense and world building, because it's the storytelling rule of show, don't tell. If you just had if you just have Tomo like in a scene, like face to face, it's just like, oh yeah, these natives talk about like this weird lizard Godzilla. That's boring and stupid. But since they actually go to the island, they have that whole scene where like they're dancing to try and like ward him off, and then like he gets told the story of them like sacrificing someone. It's like, okay, so this actually seems legit. This group of people actually believes in this giant thing, and it's probably real.
Yeah, I think it might have been a way to go ahead and introduce the island people too.
I get, maybe that's the good way to say it. I just feel like seeing that guy wash ashore and then die when we already saw people dying because they were survivors just feels a little repetitive and pointless. It possibly makes more sense in the original. Anyway, so we're going to move forward. After the ceremony, Steve and Tomo have a real bonding experience in this open tent where they just kind of stare at each other right before an absolute torrential downpour hits the island. Like, I'm talking a storm of the century.
Yeah.
And there's also some odd continuity where they keep smash cutting between Steve, Tomo, and like the rest of the island. The entire island just completely drenched, and they are totally dry. And it takes it's like it's almost like they're just sitting there. It's like, wow, that's a crazy downpour 10 feet that way.
This is also when you can tell the severe like quality difference between American cameras and what the Japanese cameras did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You can clearly tell that they put Bull or Burr or the Steve's character and Tomo's character on a set, and they used a really pretty good camera. It had decent quality for the time.
Also, here's an example, number 1 of like bad 50s acting. Like, this storm starts like ripping through the area, and like all this stuff from the original is just like, it actually looks like torrential downpour. Like windows are blowing, roofs are like caving into. And then when it cuts to Steve and Tomo, it's just like, oh man, it's raining. Damn.
I was just going to mention that it keeps smash cutting to what is arguably the most horrifying thing that has ever happened to these people. And they're just like, this breeze. It's just...
Yeah, like Steve and Tomo's...
Florida for them.
Steve and Tomo's tent, like, blows over, and they, like, get out, gingerly walk up to this tree that's, like, literally not even protecting them from the rain, by the way. And they're just leaning behind it, just like, oh, man, this wind sucks.
Steve's from America. He's probably used to, like, hurricanes in Florida.
But even then, the way how they go to dive for cover, it's like those old-timey drills of avoiding natural disasters.
Oh yeah,
to go to the nearest solid surface. This tree is literally doing nothing. I'm pretty sure it's causing them more rain than the shelter they were actually on.
They like gingerly saunter over to it.
Yeah. So during this whole sequence, while Tomo and Steve are just doing nothing, we see some really interesting shots of like there's people inside their homes. Like buildings are swaying, like, and again, like for the most part, the Japanese kind of know how to build buildings because they're so used to earthquakes. So seeing that their buildings are just swaying like this. This is a crazy storm. It's almost as if this storm has something else going on with it. In the distance, we start hearing booming sounds that are very reminiscent of footsteps. And during the night, we see a shot of this guy who is like his... it's either his brother or a relative of his, goes outside to see what's happening. He follows up. There's a bright flash of light implying that there was a thunderstrike, and he looks outside. He sees something absolutely horrifying, and he's just like shocked. And I think that's a really effective like shock to be like, what the heck did that guy see? Could you imagine walking up to your window late at night, crack of lightning, and you see the silhouette of Godzilla vaguely walking towards you?
Godzilla just night out on the town, man.
Be insane. So like this part's a really fun thing for like build up. We then see like, again, like we were mentioning before, this entire place is just completely destroyed. And we even catch a quick glimpse of Godzilla in this montage of like shots where we see his legs just kind of walking by, shuffling, and he just takes out a building, killing a couple people in the process. And we even see that the helicopter that Steve, Tomo, and the rest of the officials got there on the island was decimated in the storm. Which is funny because I bring up the next plot. The next morning, we managed to get back to the mainland, and I'm like, then what was the point of showing the chopper being destroyed?
It's a really bad piece of continuity.
That's okay. So they used the helicopter to get there, right?
Toy helicopter?
Yeah, the toy helicopter you were mentioning.
Toy helicopter, right? This helicopter gets destroyed, right? And because of all of this, I'm assuming communication went down too, because it's not like today where I can just whip out my cell phone and call up the nearest person and go, hey, can you send me a plane? It's all, radios. So how'd they get back the next morning?
I think if you really want to explain it away, you could just be like, they took like one of the locals' boats, like they offered it to them or something, and went back to the mainland, I guess, but yeah, it's just a really bad piece of continuity.
Yeah, so anyway, they managed to get back to the mainland. Steve, his buddy Tomo, and a few natives are then brought to yet another security meeting where all the natives claim that the destruction on the island was not just the storm, but they claim it was all a living creature. Dr. Yamana is stoked about this.
I'm useful.
He's so happy because he's like, I want to play with the dinosaur. I want to play with the dinosaur.
Yeah, it's really funny. So he just starts talking about Yetis and stuff, which really, I like that because I love stuff like that. I love cryptids. I love conspiracy theories. They're a lot of fun.
That probably brings it back to what I was talking about earlier, how these people, they probably view Godzilla like we do, Bigfoot.
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah. He's basically a cryptid to the people of the Odo Islands, or more like folklore, and people outside that probably view it as like a cryptid, so it's very interesting. So he starts talking...
Japanese Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, so he starts talking about Yetis, and he's like, if there are these crazy phenomenon, which is the way that the dubbers kept saying, the phenomenon. They talk about phenomena that are like at the top of like the Himalayas. Is it not conceivable that there's a phenomenon at the bottom of the ocean? So he says, like, we should totally send, like, a survey to scientifically figure out what the heck went down on Odo Island. And everyone claps. They're all like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Totally not regretting bringing in the paleontologists now.
And then it gets to one of my favorite scenes. So
this guy, he got back from this island of destruction. And then he decides to go back to the island.
Anyway, so...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but something just kind of jumped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
He said it was a 2-day layover, right?
Yes.
How much was done in 1 day for him? Like, everything was just 1 day?
I mean, that's feasible.
I don't think it matters because a disaster's happening. The airways probably got shut down. So his layover probably got extended.
It's also possible that I think he just stayed there because it's like, yo, this is a story. So,
screw Cairo. This is where the money's at.
Also, what happens to him in a day is pretty feasible. All he really did was like land, get questioned, go to the meeting, go to the island, and then at night he saw Godzilla. Like, honestly, that's like a day trip.
Except for like the next day where it's just everything just goes all downhill. But to continue with what you're saying, Turner, I'm sorry. I just have to be like,
no, it's okay you bring that up. So, and I literally have this as a joke in my thing. The dude has balls of steel to not only go back to the same island, but also board a boat, which all have a tendency of getting vaporized near that island. So,
Yeah. No paid, no gain, dude.
yeah, dude, like,
He's really desperate for that $50.
hey, fortune favors the brave. Anyway, so on the boat ride there, we learn about Emiko's interest in a marine officer named Ogata. And Steve knows Emiko is engaged to Dr. Serizawa, so obviously something a little spicy is going on here. In general, this is a love story that is a love triangle that is much more fleshed out in the original from what I remember, but the American version of this movie doesn't really seem too interested in it, so they don't really linger that much on it.
Can I mention what I noticed the entire time? It mentioned that she was engaged to Serizawa
Yes.
for a very long time, right? It was like an arranged marriage of sorts.
Yes.
Probably set up by her dad, and she's falling in love with this Marine officer. And we see later that they're just kind of chilling in her dad's living room, right? And it's so like her dad knows that she loves this Marine officer, and he legit does not care that, she's breaking some sort of like arranged marriage pact or whatever.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I cannot wait until we go back and see the original. It might be like our 5th episode or maybe even our 10th episode. It really depends. I do want to go back and watch and we all like discuss like, so this is so interesting, or maybe it is just this stupid.
Kind of was,
We'll see.
honestly.
Once on the island, they discover a patch of ground is radioactive and is a freaking footprint. They also find a trilobite for some reason in the water, which I think is supposed to heavily imply that like Godzilla is prehistoric, and so prehistoric things hang out around him. I also
mentioned they got the trilobite wrong.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Dr. Yamana calls it a 3-ring worm, which is not true. A trilobite is a type of arthropod. It is nothing to do with worms. So Yamana is a terrible paleontologist.
I don't know. He's the paleontologist here.
Did you get invited to go and help with the world disaster, including Godzilla?
I guess not. No, I did not. So while they're trying to investigate this area, they discover that it's radioactive. They find the trilobite, and like right when some people are like trying to start formulate what's going on, one of the villagers starts ringing the bell saying, Godzilla, 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 and everyone's like, yo, we need to get the heck out of here. Steve asks Tomo, yo, what's going on? Where's everyone going? It's like, it must be safer up in the hills, because that's the only way that explains like the upcoming sequence where we do see a very iconic shot. It's the one where Godzilla is cresting the hill and roars, and everyone's like, oh my god!
His googly-eyed ass.
Yes, unfortunately.
I do seriously believe that somebody's kid messed with the actual puppet for that scene, and they just happened to have googly eyes on them.
It's really funny because during that sequence, half of the shots he looks menacing. The other half of the shots he looks really goofy.
It's so derpy.
Just every front-facing scene.
It also leads to like this is slightly ahead, but like in the next scene they like show a picture of it to like the council, and it is the most goofy ass thing I've ever seen in my life. And they play it off as a picture, like an actual photo that someone like snapped of him. And it's just like it actually looks like a toy with googly eyes. It's like, come on.
No, it looks hand painted because I'm pretty sure that's just some concept art that they had left over.
There's also a. Go on, Dennis.
Okay, so in that same scene of where they see Godzilla, only the main islanders from Ono Island decide to run. If you notice that every other person that's there just decides, let's take a closer look, bring swords. And then it's like, wait a minute, what do you think swords are gonna do to Godzilla?
Death by 1,000 cuts.
I mean, I'd rather have my sword with me than I don't know. So
at least I can give him one hell of a splinter.
Yes.
Yeah, you give him a big splinter and then it'll topple over like Peter in that scene from Family Guy.
So anyway, One fun fact I do know about this scene, originally we were supposed to see a cow in his mouth. That was a...
What?
Yeah, a cow.
How?
The idea is that he was eating cows. Oddly enough, going forward, there's this weird trend. Godzilla, like, never eats anything. Like, ever.
I guess that'd be
he's a
too
vegetarian.
graphic.
I guess.
People
So-
being vaporized, no problem.
Eating a cow? No. So...
You know what? You know what? PETA would probably fly over there and kick their ass if they did that.
they didn't exist at that point, I don't think.
Oh, they
Anyway,
were
so
about to.
everyone panics when they see, logically a 300-foot tall radioactive dinosaur crested a hill. Of course he'd run away. Then it leaves, and everyone's like, yo, I gotta go see that. So they start running back up the hill, and they don't catch him, like, leaving per se, but they do see this really cool matte painting where they show Godzilla's footprints are leading into the ocean, and his tail is being dragged through it. And Nikki, I think you pointed out that like you could tell that it was a matte painting because you could see the brushstrokes.
So I have this actually down as a note that you had us go, because I had you go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell that they took that scene, and you can tell that they painted over it. They probably did what they used to do in cartoons where they had the films and everything that they could put over.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But
Well,
you
that's
can
what
tell-
a matte painting is.
Yeah. So you can tell because it goes from the hillsides all the way to the ocean that it's not the best. It's pretty, but the tail trail is not consistent. It
Oh, yeah.
gets smaller as it gets closer to the ocean. And I thought that was very interesting. Also, the footprints aren't even.
Yeah, it's
And that's just me as an art perfectionist because,
yeah.
cosplayer.
I might need to go
I
back
got
and
some
check.
real.
Sorry.
I got some real American horror movie vibes when you said that people wanted to run back up the hill and go see it. Like, yo, dude, is that a huge monster that can horribly kill us if we get too close? Yeah, man. Let's go check it out.
Oh,
No, you're joking. That's Australian because that's such Steve Irwin vibes right there.
Oh
Is that
no.
Godzilla?
I'm a
gonna go
poker.
touch it. I'm gonna poke it.
That's the same joke we make all the time. There's a 300-foot monstrosity. Its atomic breath can burn through steel. And I'm gonna hit it
400
with my
feet.
sword.
I distinctly remember Turner telling us that Godzilla is 400 feet tall, not 300.
No, he's 300 feet. Or, excuse me, he's 15 meters. I know that, but for a fact that he is 50 meters tall in this version.
What's 400 feet tall? Oh, is it the towers?
Possibly. I don't know. You will find that as we go through this series, not in really Showa, but once we hit Heisei, Godzilla gets taller and taller as buildings get taller because I've seen a really funny image where they're like, this is what Godzilla would look like in modern Japan if he was the original Godzilla. And he's this tiny, puny thing compared to all the buildings around him, so they had to keep scaling him up. That's why he gets bigger all the time.
Is that the
You
same
said he
thing
was-
as how it took Snorlax 7 generations to stand up?
You said
50 meters.
Godzilla was 50 meters long?
164 feet.
He is 50 meters tall.
That's 164 feet.
164 feet. Then Steve's a liar later in the movie.
I mean, do you want to walk up to the giant radioactive dragon with a friggin' tape measure and confirm it? Come on, man, you gotta eyeball it.
Yeah. And for the audience listening to this, if I'm getting my numbers completely wrong, like, whatever, I'm sorry. This is the shortest Godzilla is throughout most of the history, because back then his size was pretty impressive because most buildings in Japan weren't like taller than like 6 or 7 stories. So after all this happens, the survey's over and they go back to the main island, and we have yet another presentation where we get to see some really cool old school prehistoric paleo art of like the classic T-Rex dragging his tails type stuff. They start talking about how Godzilla is potentially a hybrid between land-dwelling and sea-dwelling dinosaurs, and that's where we go. It's like, as you can see from this photograph, that he is really big, and then we see it's clearly not a photograph; it's straight up like a painting. So,
Oh, bad.
Derpy.
and so this leads to one of my gripes about Godzilla, and I'll explain like the most accepted origin story of Godzilla like later, but like, Yamada claims that Godzilla is a surviving population of Jurassic dinosaurs that somehow went undetected. And yet somehow it was quote-unquote resurrected by the H-bomb tests. And I'm not entirely sure what this means, because if it was resurrected, how did the Odo Island people even have a legend of Godzilla in the first place? Were they actually sacrificing it to something, or is it just a huge cosmic coincidence that something vaguely like their legend just so happens to live near there? And if it's a surviving population, why is it only one? How could it have been resurrected if it's a surviving population? It's just, I don't know. It bothers me.
There's many factors that can actually go into that. For the people who lived on the island, it just could actually happen to be a matter of myths, legends, and mythos. We still have myths and legends on how the Aztecs did all of their stuff and everything and whatnot. So it could literally be...
It was aliens. Sorry.
It could literally be that. It's how stories travel over time, and then over time they get more dramatized. And it could happen that what they were worshipping wasn't actually Godzilla, that just happens to be where the remains or this beast happened to be. You know, it could have just been a coincidence.
It could have been.
And is it possible that he didn't have the radiation blast or whatever it was before, and that only was caused because of the hydrogen bomb?
Yeah.
Testing?
I think Steve had something to say that I'll get into what the most accepted origin by most fans is.
I feel like the implication of the movie, though, is that Godzilla is actually the deity that the people on the island were afraid of.
Which would imply that he's been around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and also coupled with the fact that Japanese culture is very... What's the religion called? Shinto?
Shinto, I think there's a few other ones, but Shinto is the one I'm aware of.
It's the biggest one.
Yeah, it's the one where they believe in, many gods like the Egyptians. So naturally, Japanese people are, more superstitious about that kind of thing.
You want your umbrella to be a god? Well, here you go. Your umbrella's a god now.
It's now called a yokai, I think is the term.
Yeah, we
demons.
Oh.
Obviously the majority of us here, we watch animes and everything, and we see how big their superstitions are and their culture,
Yeah. That's interesting. So, what most versions of Godzilla accept as the origin of Godzilla is that he is a surviving species of something called Godzillasaurus, which in the Heisei era they kind of touch on. We will literally get to see a Godzillasaurus in the Heisei era. It's very interesting. And the idea is that it used to be basically just a dinosaur. And then the H-bomb tests happened and turned it into what is Godzilla. And because I forced you all to watch Godzilla -1, yes, that version is the most accepted. That is what happened. There were dinosaurs. No one saw them before. The Odo Islanders saw the dinosaurs, and they're like, oh my god, it's a god. And then we nuked them, and it just so happened that nuking them turned them into this horrifying thing that is Godzilla. But, yeah.
It's our fault.
Yeah, it is straight up our fault. So, after we get the explanation about what Godzilla is, I'm assuming it makes more sense in the original. Steve then reports back to the U.S. That the Japanese are planning to kill Godzilla with depth charges. And he even calls Serizawa to postpone their dinner for the sake of the editor and the budget.
Editor's sitting there going, wow, this is a big scoop. Give what you can. Give what you can.
Yeah. So
the hilarious part about what happens next is they just... Actually, it happens a lot in this movie. They drop the depth charges. There's a little montage of it. And then they just assume it worked. No body, no confirmation. They just drop some depth charges into Tokyo Bay or whatever. They're just yeah, we got him, guys.
It's funny. There was one more scene that's that came up before we did that. That's a little important. So before they bomb Godzilla, we cut to Serizawa's home, where we learned that Emiko and him were in an arranged marriage. This is where we actually learned that it was an arranged marriage. But
I thought we learned about that on the ship.
We learned on the ship that she was engaged. This is here that we learned that it was arranged. But unfortunately, Emiko wants to marry Ogata. She is there at Serizawa's home to try and tell him this for the this is the moment that she's like, I'm going to tell him. I got to tell him. We got to cut it off. And then hopefully we can be both adults about this. None of that happens. Instead, Serizawa takes Emiko straight to his man cave and shows her something that is just messed up.
I think it's a really good to mention here that it is stated that Emiko really respects Serizawa and the work that he does. So it was really hard for her to actually tell him because of how much she respects him.
Yeah, so it's not like she hates him or anything. She's just not interested in him.
Also, when you put it into context, like, the scene is set, like, she's gonna tell him, and it's, like, this serious thing. But, like, immediately, he's just like, hey, you want to see something? Okay. Brings her into the man cave, all these beakers and test tubes, shows her the thing, and we get the worst 50s acting ever.
I thought it was pretty good. You guys are terrible.
Nah,
No,
How
so
much
bad.
50s how much 50s acting have you guys actually watched?
Enough to
Enough.
where it's just enough to say that was kind of.
Again, her performance wasn't bad. Just, it was so overacted in that moment for, like, we'll get to it later, but, like, what he actually showed her, yes, is, like, if you saw that for the first time, it's like, alright, that's pretty messed up, but, like, her reaction to it in this first part is just like, alright, relax.
Yeah. So we're not going to say what it is right away, but basically, Serizawa puts something into a fish tank. Something happens.
It really needs to be cleaned.
It does need to be clean. So he puts something in a fish tank, turns on a machine, something horrifying happens, and Serizawa, we later learned that, like, the reason he did this is because he needed to tell someone. He discovered something horrible, and he couldn't live with the fact that only he knew. So he tells Emiko about it, and he swears her to secrecy, and she does this thing where she mentions, I won't even tell my dad, and I'm like, well, I hope so. That's the whole point of not telling anyone.
Chip
will
will
wish I had a
immediately
secret.
break this promise, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It'll take her about a day.
Yeah. So
Not immediately.
after we went through that whole montage, or excuse me, that sequence of something that'll become much more relevant later, we then cut to the naval montage that Dom, you mentioned, where Tokyo just straight up summons all of their World War II stock footage, and they bomb the heck out of the ocean where they think he is.
Yeah.
And like what Dom said, where they think they got him, and then they start partying on the boat. On the boat in the water, it's like, yeah, we got him. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah, and then he shows up
Oh, yeah.
He's
immediately.
like,
Right?
hi, bitch. You
I'm
looking for
still
me?"
alive.
It's so, yeah. Like, right before we get to that part, we also see a spot where Emiko and her family are, like, watching on the news. They're like, yeah, we got him. And Yamada is, like, really bummed about this. Is like, man, I wanted to see a dinosaur again, man. Why we gotta kill it?
I wanted to be its friend.
Yes.
So
So,
robbed the chance to see an actual dinosaur.
yeah. So, but basically, he laments that, like, it's a brand new thing. Why do we kill it? Which is, it's sad because I'm kind of on both. I understand both angles from it. It's a brand new thing. Why are we going to kill it? It also did vaporize 8 boats.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned that. It's just like, yeah, he's got a point, but, like, it kind of killed, like, 60 people, I think.
And it doesn't seem to be stopping from what I can tell.
Yeah. And it's aggressive as far as they can tell. Like, the boats that sank, like, weren't really doing anything, like, crazy, like, polluting the environment. So their only crime was really existing.
Yeah. So, regardless, Tokyo is celebrating like it's 1999. Everyone's like, yeah, we got him. Woo, yeah, bombs. We could solve all of our problems. They're even so cocky that they're celebrating on a boat in Tokyo Bay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Say that they were smart.
Anyway, so, shocker, much like what Dennis brought up, Godzilla shows up in the bay to no one's surprise. Luckily, the people on the boat get to live because Godzilla got bored and he just kind of leaves.
He's like, hi, bitch. How you doing? Goes for a stroll in the neighborhood. All right, I'm going to go home now. Well, did I break that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so The whole military straight up panics at this point. The Japanese break into their film archives once again to summon as much stock footage as they can to mobilize against this prehistoric threat. Later, Godzilla comes back into the harbor, and I find it funny that the first thing they try are just machine guns. Like,
Wait, is this when they did the giant tower?
no, that's later. This is the
Okay.
first time he makes landfall. And
Okay.
I just like to imagine that, like, human beings have always been smart. I can't believe that anyone in the Japanese army, after learning what they're going to be defending against, thought that was going to work.
No, but here's one thing that I actually really enjoyed watching it for the first time.
Mhm.
I haven't, to be honest, never watched a full Godzilla movie except for Godzilla -1 and this one.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I've been introduced to it, it's either through been the games or something of a giant collaboration that they were doing.
Yeah.
But the thing I noticed about watching the movie is that they never show Godzilla outright until close to the end. It wasn't until you only see, the rumors about him, the rumors of what he could be, what he looked like. Then we start seeing more of him, especially back at the Ono Island rampage, where you just see his feet.
Yeah.
You see his foot, and then his footsteps. Then you see the top part of him, which nowadays wouldn't be that bad. It's the top part of something, but back then it's the, oh my God, what am I? What is this thing? Until we fully see him on this boat, just causing rampage, walking through.
Later Godzilla comes back and they try to kill him with machine guns. Huge shocker, gigantic monster that basically it's like a pea shooter against him. Like, forget the fact that Godzilla is supposed to be like immune to all forms of weaponry. Like, even a creature his size would be like, ow, stop, if you fired the kind of guns they were shooting at him. So it looks like just now they decided to evacuate the city, even though they had a sighting of him in the bay and they know he can go on land.
That's right. That's the thing I was gonna get into. Effectively they decide, yeah, let's start evacuation now. He is literally right next door. What do you mean start evacuating now?
It is entirely
Too busy celebrating.
Yeah, it is entirely possible that maybe. Well, actually, no. This is the next night than the last night that they saw him. So they had time if they really wanted to. Anyway, so after this, Yamada and Steve just kind of wind up on both the same hill. Like, we see how Yamada got there, but Steve just like poof, he's just there. So it's really funny. And they wind up on the same hill, and they see as Godzilla makes landfall for the first time, and we get a really good look of what Godzilla looks like. And we get to see this really impressive film composite where we see Godzilla is making landfall, and on the ground we can see little people, which that must have been really impressive for the time.
And I'm like,
Here's a good question, because you obviously work in editing to a degree. You told us how they did this then. How would that editing go today?
Oh, it'd be leagues easier. Because what they had to do was they had to film Godzilla walking on set, but they had to have a section that was already like specifically painted black on film so that they can later re-expose that area with footage of the people moving. And then they had to do all this, I think it's called an optical printer. It's a very complicated machine that they needed to use back in the day in order to properly expose plates in the right way, in the right order. It's rather complicated. I would, for the listeners who are very interested in what like old school compositing is, look up what an optical printer is. It is one heck of a machine, and it is what my job used to use. Now we just use things like Nuke and After Effects. So this then leads up to a very famous sequence of a train crashing into Godzilla, where he then proceeds to pick it up with his jaws and slam it back down. And this also leads to my theory that from this point forward, when this is the moment Godzilla decided he hated infrastructure. because it hit his toe, and he's like, "Ow!"
My toe!
That's it. Everyone dies.
That's it. Killing you both.
So after this, Godzilla has a quick little jog around the harbor area, and then he gets kind of bored and just wanders off.
Goes back home.
Yeah, he just goes back home. And he's like, "All right, you better have my rent ready when I come back tomorrow."
Get rid of every infrastructure I don't like.
Yeah, but then they do the exact opposite of getting rid of all the infrastructure. They add more.
Oh, yeah, I was just about to get into that. So the next day, Steve is writing his story, where he learns from Tomo that they have a plan to set up a series of towers of power lines to deter Godzilla, like some gigantic electric fence. They claim it uses over 300,000 volts, which, if I remember correctly, I don't think volts is the thing that kills you. It's either amps or watts, but, like, whatever. But I've complained about this to you guys constantly. I am stumped as to how the heck they managed to build and design this gigantic perimeter of... These aren't just telephone poles. This is a straight up, like, those big power towers.
Like radio broadcasting towers.
Oh, yeah, it almost looks like that. And there's just an entire perimeter of these things across Tokyo Bay. And they said that it took them a day to set this up. And I'm like, no.
Nah.
I don't believe it.
Power of German engineering, man.
It also, and at the same time, it also only took them a day to evacuate everybody.
Oh yeah, they were evacuating while they were setting up this. That's just, it's dumb.
No, that's just a complete lie, because in like literally 5 minutes, you see people like in a building that Godzilla's like trampling through. It's like, did y'all not get the order? There's a giant lizard blowing stuff up. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Question: you said the voltage at these this electric wall effectively.
Yeah.
Like 300,000.
So I looked it up. For a human, now this is just for a human, 100 to 250 would be considered lethal.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
With the lowest being at times in rare circumstances being 42 volts. Now 300,000, that's effectively
Overkill.
It's effectively quadrupling the size of that.
According to Ohio State University, because you were trying to figure out whether or not it was watts, amps, or volts that killed, it says it's the current that killed. It's not the word itself, of course. There's no definitive word as, it's a real measure of shock intensity lies in the amount of current, amperes, is what it says in parentheses, forced through the body, and not AMPERES.
Yeah, that's amps or amperes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's what that says. Okay. So it's the amount of current forced through the body, not the voltage. Any electrical device used in a house wiring circuit can, under certain conditions, transmit a fatal current. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure if you have enough watts, it would kill you.
I guess.
According to Science ABC, because under Google it says, can 1 watt kill a human? It says it's not the voltage that kills humans. It's the current that kills. Humans have died at as low as 42 volts. Time is also a factor. A current of 0.1 amps for a mere 2 seconds can be fatal. So
dang. Maybe that's why maybe that's why it didn't work.
Because Godzilla's not a human.
Well, yeah, what they didn't use the right amps. They were so focused on volts they didn't realize it was the amps that they needed.
Yeah.
So later that night, we see that Steve has once again somehow wheeled his way into the main news center to get a first-hand view of everything. This is also where Steve begins to use his tape recorder and record everything that happens, and leads to some pretty iconic imagery from the American version of him sweating, holding up the microphone and being like, I cannot believe what I'm looking at. It's pretty cool.
Really, despite the fact that, it's interesting how they did this character. The actor is actually really good.
Yeah. He's also very classically handsome.
Actually, that was a thing during that time period. He was numerously in the top 5 hottest actors in Hollywood.
Oh, that's funny.
Either way.
All right, so And this is all right. So after this is one of my favorite things. For the third time, Godzilla shows up in the exact same spot on the bay. And it's really funny. It's like, what's up? It just shows up.
It really does look like it.
Yeah.
This time at night, he was trying to get down and get some sake. Good night on the town, man.
I love his little waddle to the fucking electric wall. He's full on. What is this? What did you build?
Oh,
What the heck is this?
so nice. Did you work hard on it? And then I'm gonna destroy it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not even that. It's not even that. It's a what? It's a spider wing. There's spiders here.
Oh, it tingled a little bit.
So then Godzilla emerges from the exact same spot, and we see that finally the military has brought some actual artillery this time. Steve then begins to narrate everything he sees as Godzilla takes one look at this electric fence and straight up does not care. Absolute zero hesitation, just walks right through it. And thankfully, the military has the wherewithal to not hesitate after seeing the fence fail, and they just proceed to unload on him. Like, they continue to fire at him. Godzilla, like you guys said, he seems almost insulted at this point that they even bothered to try and stop him with this giant electric fence. And so he seems to make it his mission to knock down each and every single tower like he's a bully trying to destroy some kid's sandcastle.
Yeah.
Instead of kicking sand in our face, it's our own literal buildings.
Yeah. And it's crazy that this also escalates to the point that Godzilla uses his atomic breath for the first time, and you see him melt the power towers, which is interesting because it turns out those towers are made of wax, and the trick is that they had a heat gun aimed at it and stage lights to make it look like they were glowing, because wax is kind of translucent, so you get like light will bounce inside it. So they had the stage lights pointed at them, makes it look like heated metal in black and white, and because it's wax getting heated, it slowly melts and it collapses. It's like, oh, it's a really cool effect.
Oh,
I imagine they did something like that. Did they I imagine they sped it up too.
But it's possible they did that, yeah.
I also love how the atomic breath in this movie, since it's the very first one, just kind of looks like a light mist.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
called internally they called it the incandescent light, is what my research told me. So the concept of atomic breath did not become into usage until later.
I think this is also I think this is also a part where Godzilla looks directly at the camera and you can really see those googly eyes.
Oh yeah.
It really rings a question in my mind. You explaining how they did that for the black and white effects.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they used to do for black and white, and most people know this nowadays, is like, for instance, the entire Addams Family set, to give it that perfect appeal in black and white, it was actually pink and green. So what color was the actual Godzilla suit?
The original suit was charcoal black. If I'm getting my information right, I'm pretty sure someone in the comments is like, actually.
I would love for that actually to happen, because that intrigues me. The entirety of coloring for black and white does intrigue me. The fact that red lipstick for those films was actually a different color, just to give it the hue of red, was intriguing. So it's like, well, how did they take this into account for this film?
Yeah, that is interesting that like you said, like they use different colors because they knew that they would react differently in a black and white camera. So I don't really have the information on that. So as Godzilla, he knocks down the electric fence because he's just insulted by the very concept, and they just completely hammer him with artillery. Does nothing because, well, he's Godzilla. This is where we're treated to a montage of some good old-fashioned man in a suit versus miniature sets. I give you Godzilla, the destroyer of model train sets since 1954.
This scene is the one that we see replay in a lot of childhood cartoons and TV shows. It's very iconic. It gets recreated a lot in media.
Exactly. This is where all the budget went. And I made like a list of some of the types of visual effects I saw. They use suitmation, which is just a dude in a suit. Like, it's a lot of people call it suitmation, and it's very intriguing. It's a guy in a suit pretending to knock down buildings. That's what Godzilla primarily is. He is also sometimes a puppet, as Tyrell has pointed out, that oftentimes the puppet has really goofy eyes. The main suits, their eyes are not necessarily as goofy looking, but the puppets, they just look goofy.
Yeah.
They go back and forth. It looks like they go back and forth between two puppets, one that has googly eyes, and then the other one that has like teddy bear button eyes.
Oh yeah, that is, yeah.
I swear, every time they have him look directly at the camera, like when he's turning his head or something, they're using the googly eyes, and you just immediately miss it.
It's like I dubbed it, like every time when we were watching it, I dubbed it like, oh, okay, scary Godzilla, which is the suit, and then I go goofy Godzilla, which is the googly eyes, because he's googly eyes, and then it's like, oh, cute Godzilla, because how can you not look at teddy bear button eyes and go, aw.
Yeah.
I do remember there was this one scene when he was stomping through the city where his eyes just looked like black marbles.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's the
that
teddy
is
bear
really
button eye.
scary.
That was pretty nice.
There was also many composites where I noticed that a lot of it was very shaky, because at the time it is possible that maybe they didn't have an optical printer like I was mentioning before. I don't know. I would love to know exactly how each of these double exposures were done, because you can tell, like, oh, there's a composite here because there is a area where the foreground is shaking, but the background is not, or not at the same rate as what's in front of it, and that's just because of the nature of, like, imprecise cameras at the time. Again, I'm not here to, like, poo-poo on all of this. This is, like, really impressive for a film studio that did not have access to the same kind of technology that modern Hollywood at that time had. So to be able to get this close to what Hollywood could do at the time is really impressive. There's also there was a hand puppet that had the ability to shoot smoke out of its mouth, and sometimes when they would see the big main guy, they would hand draw the atomic breath coming out of him. There's also lots of miniatures, which I think you all know me. I love to paint miniatures, so I think I could trace my love for it back to this movie. Although this isn't the first Godzilla movie I ever saw. That was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from the Heisei era, but this is... and there was a lot of pyrotechnics. The dude who was, like, the producer was, like, he went up to the guys, like, I need you to go and get some fireworks. And the guy's like, well, how much do you want? And it said, all of it.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Based off the quality of the movies. Of course, nowadays we have an A-listed movie, and then we have B-rated movies based off of the level of production that goes along with it. So, like, a B-rated movie nowadays, I think, is like Sharknado. My mom watches she loves B-rated movies, so I've, grow up watching bad graphics. And then, like, of course, an A-listed movie nowadays has been like Avatar or something like that. During the time period, would you list this as an A, B, or C listed movie?
So that's interesting. This was the most expensive movie Toho had ever made at the time. In fact, it was so expensive that if this movie did not succeed, they were boned.
So it's like Final Fantasy to Square Enix. Cool.
Yeah. And the interesting thing I found out, this movie came out the same year as Seven Samurai, and those two were, like, the most impressive films that Japan had made up until that point, was Gojira, and Seven Samurai. And it was, both of those films won a lot of awards in the local Japanese, like, film awards that year, so it was very fun. So, in general, I'm not going to go into every single thing Godzilla does during this montage, but he just destroys Tokyo. There is one really, really funny thing that does happen, though, and everyone here, I think, loves it. There's this sequence where we cut to some, like, police officers in the middle of the street. They're all listening to a radio in a car, and they're trying to, like, figure out what's going on. They're like, huh? What's going on? What's going on? And somehow they don't realize that Godzilla is literally one block over.
What's going on? Look up, you idiots!
So Godzilla, this gigantic, his footsteps boom everywhere he goes, somehow sneaks up on these guys. They all panic. The guy who's left in the car is there. Godzilla shoots his atomic breath at the car, and the funniest death sound I've ever heard is like, ah!
Not to mention the circumstances too. Just, oh man, where's the 30-foot tall giant lizard monster? Let's all listen to the radio to make sure we know where he is. Oh god, he's right over there.
No, one of the best scenes, you just see the head, Godzilla's head pop out. It's like, what you doing there?
Nah, it's never good though, guys too.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
It's whatever, he's like behind a building or something, and it's a wide shot. It's the puppet, and then it constantly will be looking in the direction of the camera. It's like, stop.
Yeah. So, after that, there's a part where Steve is looking out, and he says a quote that I really liked that I put in my notes. It says, "Godzilla has turned the heart of Tokyo into a sea of fire," which, from some research I've done, Godzilla is not only a reference to, like, atomic bombs and, like, in general, like, H-bomb tests and stuff. He's also kind of, like, this whole sequence is also a bit of a reference to the firebombing of Japan that America did do to Japan at the time, which killed way more people than any of the atomic bombs. And we did see some of that in Godzilla -1, where there was that sequence where we saw what happened to Japan, Tokyo. Everything was rubble. And that was just from fire bombings. There was no nuke that ever hit Tokyo.
I think, because we'll get to this whenever we go and watch the Japanese one. I think that was my favorite. And we definitely see it in upcoming scenes that we're about to discuss, is the metaphor that this movie has to that whole event. It's just it's impactful.
It is very impactful. A lot of the people who, it's the kind of imagery that only the people who witnessed the real thing could have, like, recreated.
You think that there are survivors of that whole event that goes back and watches Godzilla, who they can't watch it because it's like reliving that entire event.
That is entirely possible. I never even thought of that. So
yeah, in reality, it's not too terribly long ago that happened.
Yeah, it's not even 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I hate to break it up, but then we get the best one, and I truly mean this. I know we've said this a lot in terms of the movie has some great scenes, but by far, to me, this is the best one.
What was it?
Then Godzilla, after melting the police officer in the car, waddles over to what looks like the Japanese Parliament building, sees it, and instantly gets so enraged and infuriated, more than you've ever seen him.
Oh yeah, he hates the clock tower.
We mentioned earlier scenes that this building looks like an Aztec building, so maybe he was just angry at the cultural appropriation.
No, that looks like, I think that's the Japanese Parliament, because that's where they were having the meetings. Mm-hmm. And he just fucking decimates this building, picks it up, throws it around, goes over to the watchtower, and says, no more ringing bells. And I just love how infuriating he gets.
You were right. That was the National Diet Building. Yet, and it looks like at the top. It looks like an Aztec building. Going down, it kind of looks like the politician buildings we have in America. So it's just eye-catching.
Yeah. There's also this great sequence where there's these reporters who are in a, like, tower taking pictures of Godzilla, and there's this really haunting image where they see him, like, open his mouth and looking towards them. It's one of the few shots where the puppet Zilla actually looks really terrifying. And then Puppet Zilla just does not like the paparazzi and just completely eats their tower.
I said no photos.
And they
stare at him approaching.
There's also this shot that I found really interesting. This is a really, like, I know this because I saw the original movie, and there's a part where a mother is holding her children, and in Japanese she is saying, "Do not worry, kids. Soon we'll be with your father in heaven." Oh, it's horrifying. But in the American version, they just have her say Japanese straight up, and they don't dub it, they don't, like, put subtitles over it, they just leave it as is. Again, some of that mild censorship where Americans know that no American speaks Japanese.
Yeah.
So
At least at this point in time.
yeah. Later, I think my favorite, like, petty thing that Godzilla does during this whole sequence is where he comes across a bridge where it doesn't even look like it's in his way. He kind of goes out of his way to walk up to this bridge, pick it up, and flip it like an angry Magic the Gathering player who rage quits.
He really did. Like, they just had it out for that bridge. No reason. Just this bridge, gone. Out of my sight.
It's like you already said, he hates infrastructure.
Yeah,
He's like, I said, get rid of it. Damn it. No infrastructure.
So,
Especially this bridge. I hate this bridge.
so after Godzilla rage quits his local magic tournament, this is when the military finally sends in jets. This is like 14 minutes later, which I guess in canon was like maybe a couple hours. Finally, they send jet fighters in to try and stop him. And it's so funny. They have their missiles are made out of sparkles. Not a single one of the pilots hits him.
When you're that scared, all aim goes out the window.
Especially more so when you see the shot afterwards of him leaving. You just see his opacity start getting lower and lower.
That's such I wonder why they did that. There must have been like a technical reason that they did a composite there, because it didn't seem like they needed to. It's so weird.
It could just be a matter of it was an accident and they just kept it in.
It could be. Well, no, but the reason why it can't be an accident is because it's a composite. That means they deliberately had to do something there to make it look that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering why they felt the need to have to composite Godzilla in that shot. Because it looked like they could have just had him there and also sending the stuff at him, but whatever. So
Who knows? Maybe one day we'll actually get somebody who worked on the movie on this podcast and they could tell us why.
that'd be, if I managed to do that, that'd be insane.
If there's anyone alive and willing to do that, that'd be amazing.
I think a good number of the people who worked on this film are still alive, but yes, there are quite a few who are no longer with us. At this point, so the military are attacking them. Everyone in the people who are, seeing this go down are like, yeah, we're doing it. Yeah, screw that guy. Kill Godzilla. They're all cheering like they're doing something. But again, it's really funny because not a single rocket hits him. And Godzilla, I think, just out of sheer embarrassment, just leaves.
They're just like, oh, you guys aren't any fun. I'm going home.
They don't know yet that Godzilla is that guy.
After all of this, the utter devastation of Tokyo, this is when we cut back to the very beginning of the film, where we see, once again, Steve is in the hospital, and we have a major continuity error because now he's got bandages on his face that he did not have at the very beginning. So it's at this point that Ogata and Emiko are there to see Steve, and Emiko admits to Steve that there might be a weapon that could destroy Godzilla, but she swore to keep it a secret for Serizawa. Steve then urges her to speak with the doctor since Tokyo was just straight up destroyed. It could be another city if no one acts. And from there, she recounts what she witnessed the night she attempted to tell Serizawa that she wasn't going to marry him. She sees that Serizawa has created a device that can destroy all oxygen in a body of water and thus reduce living matter to dust in a matter of moments. Serizawa says that his invention has no beneficial application and fears to let the world know about his discovery.
It's really like I need to keep this a secret because we just got out of this big war. A lot of people died and everything. And if this comes to light, then so many other people, there'll be another war because humankind just loves big things that cause destruction, apparently.
Exactly. And this weapon, which I'll be able to do the name drop for it in a bit. This weapon basically destroys underwater ecosystems on such a scale that it's just wow. So after Emiko recounts what she saw, Steve again urges her and Ogata to go and confront Serizawa about this. So the two go and they confront him, and they finally name drop one of the most infamous sci-fi weapons from this entire series, the Oxygen Destroyer.
Oxygen Destroyer.
Yeah.
Bum-bum.
This weapon is very mythologized within like Godzilla lore. Like they will bring it up a couple times in like some later films, and like some really interesting stuff comes from it. So as the couple confronts Serizawa, there's a huge struggle between the two, and Serizawa ultimately comes out on top and like really hurts Ogata, causing him to bleed. It is at this moment that like Serizawa sees how much Emiko cares about Ogata, and he seems to have like a moment of like, oh wow, I feel terrible for what I did, and he kind of tries to help Ogata and like, you know, get him back up on his feet and help him clean himself up. And it's then that he starts to lament that he can't use his weapon because he's terrified that if his weapon were to be used, it would be a bigger threat than Godzilla itself, which then leads to a line that I really like. And I cannot wait to see if this is like something either Americans came up with or this is actually from the original Japanese. Ogata says a line that says a line to the doctor that goes like, "Then you have a responsibility that no man has ever faced. You have your fear, which might become reality, and you have Godzilla, which is reality." And it's kind of heartbreaking because it's like, could you imagine being that guy where you have a weapon that could like really mess up the world, and it's the only thing that could stop Godzilla, but this thing could be an even bigger can of worms than Godzilla himself.
It's very interesting, and I think he realizes this in a minute. He was so scared because the thing that he found had no implications of being used for any good whatsoever, and this is like the one good thing it can be used for.
I never thought of it that way. That is interesting. So
I also don't know if whoever wrote that did so intentionally, but God, that's such a good line. Like, because it's an allegory for just human history and the human psyche in general. Like, fear stops humans from doing so many things. There's so many would-be's and would-nots and things we've missed out on because we're too afraid to do it. But it's just like, if you just go and do it, then you'll at least know, or you'll at least, get some kind of resolution. And it's just so true in today's world, too, where it's just like, oh, man, I don't want to quit my job because I don't know if I'll be able to find something else, which it's a valid concern. But also, like, if you never try, then you're just a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, at that point.
So the doctor is in anguish over the thought of using his weapon, and this is when the TV starts doing a Deus Ex guilt trip at this point, and there's a broadcast of all these children singing a prayer to all the people who lost their lives and to the survivors of Godzilla's attack. And this does a really good job of convincing Serizawa that he needs to do something. But
Can I just mention something? There's day after Godzilla attacks, and these kids still have to go to school.
Oh, dude, the Japanese, man, they take their education seriously.
Like, I know half the city got destroyed last night, but gotta get that education. Come on. And I'd be like, no.
Today's lesson.
No, I'm out.
Today's lesson: how to treat radiation burns. It's messed up.
By the way, after lunch, we're gonna have a giant broadcast, and we're gonna sing, and we're gonna guilt trip this scientist into doing what we need him to do.
Yeah, like this is a whole montage of Serizawa seeing like what happened in the wake of Godzilla. So he decides that he is going to use the weapon, but he's going to do it on his terms. So he decides that he's going to burn all of his research, and this does cause Emiko to like cry and be in anguish because she realizes this is this guy's work and he's like basically destroying it. And even though it is a horrible weapon, it is something that he put a lot of effort into, and she does highly respect him.
It's his life's work, and he's so serious about it not getting out and everything. So yeah, that would be. And can you imagine that? You getting to be alongside someone that you respect completely, and then you just watch them. You watch them the majority of your life working on this big thing, pour their life into it, and then you just watch them destroy it for whatever reason. That Oh gosh, I think I'd have a similar reaction.
Yeah. It's very strong themes that it's incredible how much still carries over from the original into this Americanized version. So it's so interesting. Anyway, so after this, Serizawa and Ogata are then through I'm assuming it's a joint military operation where like a bunch of scientists like somehow figure out where Godzilla is. Probably through like, oh yeah, there was a shot where there was a scientist pointing his Geiger counter at the ocean. It's like, yep, that's Godzilla.
He's right there.
Geiger counter too.
Yeah,
It's like the Geiger counter that you'd see them use in your house after a small explosion.
yeah, exactly. That's just what's going on. So Serizawa and Ogata set up, and they dive down to go find Godzilla, and this leads to a sequence that's just kind of awkward where they're trying to avoid Godzilla underwater, but it's never really clear if Godzilla actually sees them or is actually gonna do something to them. They're like, oh gee, oh no, what are we gonna do? It's very weird, and I'm curious if it's paced differently in the original.
He's just sleeping in from that hangover he had from the night before, man.
Oh yeah, he did look like he had a.
No, it looks like they caught Godzilla asleep.
They did.
So anytime they move, they're like, I don't know if we're about to wake him up or anything. So let's.
Well, he does move afterward, but yes, we do find him kind of sleeping to begin with.
That's why I made the joke. Like, looks like he's sleeping off a hangover. Hit too much sake. Ate too many bridges.
Yeah.
Spicy water.
Oh yeah. So right before that happens, Serizawa taps Ogata on his shoulder and he starts to ascend. And it's kind of oddly shown. Like Ogata starts acting like he was tricked into doing something, but it looked like he did it of his own accord. I don't know, but it's heavily implied that the point is that Serizawa made Ogata surface before him because as you quickly discover that Serizawa plans to go down with his weapon. He's able to activate the oxygen destroyer, and it basically turns the water spicy, like Dom said.
Godzilla acts like it too. Obviously he's dying. He's like flailing around, but it just looks like he's going, oh no! Oh my god, they put habanero sauce in the water.
Everyone's like,
they got that Sprite from McDonald's.
No, dude, the McDonald's Sprite is good.
everyone on the surface is like begging Serizawa to surface, but he says basically he's gonna take the secret of the oxygen destroyer with him, and he severs his line and oxygen to the surface right before he tells Ogata and Emiko to be happy together, because he kind of just accepts his fate at this point. Which, interesting thing about that, prior to this movie, America occupied Japan for a very long time, and they outlawed any depictions of suicide in Japanese media because of, well, kamikaze pilots, or at least that's what I believe my research has led me to. So it's very interesting that as soon as America is not directly in control of censorship in Japan, that this movie comes out and it has a scene of a heroic sacrifice via suicide, in a sense.
So why were they able to keep that if everything else was... So was it America that outlawed it, or was it Japan?
It was America imposing their will on Japan after World War II.
Yeah.
So why did we decide to keep it? Because it was heroic?
I guess.
No, Turner just said that it ran out before they started making this movie.
Yeah.
Like, this is around the time we weren't occupying Japan anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we then see one last time Godzilla surface, and he's like, ah! And he's just
totally flipping off the people in the boat.
It's like a scene where, like, it's muffled as he's underwater, and he comes up just, ah!
It's really funny looking, but, like, it's also, again, I'm assuming, like, because I think it's funny because I live in 2024 and I've seen the peak of Avatar and all that stuff. Back then, that must have been pretty convincing. Like, it was, like,
yeah,
it was pretty scary looking. After he surfaces, he then sinks to the bottom of the ocean, where over time, thanks to all the destruction of oxygen all around him, his body is reduced to a skeleton and then to nothing. Everyone then laments of the death of Serizawa, and I do believe that Steve makes a little comment about it's finally over, the monster has been vanquished. And then we just roll credits.
Or has it?
It just
Bum,
ends.
bum, bum.
No, it's not even or has it. It just ends. It's over. It's just like, bro, what the hell?
Special after credit scenes haven't started yet.
Oh yeah, no, that's
Nope. That's just the end of the movie. We killed it. Deuces.
Well, here's the thing about that. I personally believe that is the best way they could have ended that. Like, where do you go from there? You know, we could have sent the American guy on his way, or is it like a celebration and everything? I think for how movies are done, then that was a very impactful way to end the movie, especially for what it was supposed to do.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I saw some classic Universal monster films recently, and a lot of them do end that way. They just kind of end.
An homage to Godzilla.
Dennis and I have watched a lot of he's rewatching it with me. I've watched a lot of MASH. For those who don't know what that is, it is a comedy. It's a hospital comedy that takes place during the time of the Korean police action, and
The Korean War.
well, no, it's a police action. That is the same thing as a war, but you can get real technical on what it is, and I'm not going to debate on what it is here. But it turns into it starts off as a comedy, but this whole show goes on for 10 seasons, and the more we get into it, the more you see they take more of a serious stance on it, and a lot of those episodes they will end that way. It's like at the time that was like when they wanted to get a message across, they just end it, and you can see it in other shows like in Twilight Zone and other media as well at the time.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I really wish we still did that in media. There's always got to be some sort of celebration at the end of a movie.
That's interesting, yeah. So,
Gotta really pat our own backs.
all right, cool. So, that's the end of the movie. We have credits. There is no after credit scene because this is not the MCU. So, now we're going to talk about what we thought about the film. I give it an 8 out of 10. Now, for our viewers, I would like to stress that we're not IGN, and anything lower than a 7 is garbage. We're if we rate a movie as a 5, it's going to be kind of like the YouTuber Angry Joe's system, where a 5 is just an average movie.
You know, how my family's always done it is there's 2 categories for movies. There's the movies that you're willing to go back and watch over and over again because they're that good, and then there's the movies that they're so good you only need to watch it once.
Oh.
And it maybe one day in the future you can pick it up again.
Okay.
So for me, a movie that I will watch over and over again because I think it's that good of a movie is Day After Tomorrow. That's a really good movie. And then one that I will probably never go back and watch again, and I'll pick on this later, is the one I mentioned to you, Turner, is, and it's for multiple reasons of why, is probably Grave with the Fireflies.
Oh, yeah, I do need to see that with you.
It is such a good movie, and I've watched it more than once, but it is definitely a movie that you don't need to turn it on like every Friday night. You probably don't want to turn it on every Friday night.
All
Or
right.
even then, it's also like Boy in the Striped Pajamas. That is a good movie, but I will never watch it again.
All right. So, what would you give this movie?
So I gonna give like a big reference here because I have stated it multiple times during this episode. Is I love old cinema. I grew up watching it while I enjoyed my dinner and everything. So going off of that, I would honestly give this a 9.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. You like it a lot more than me. Whoa. I'm shocked.
Now,
Your claim to fame is gone, buddy. You have to quit.
now my reasoning is primarily, and this also stems to the fact that I love literary concepts in majority of media. It was something that was crammed down my throat in high school and everything. The symbolism that this movie has towards the events that happened in Japan is so, you can tell it is there and is so impactful. It's definitely a movie that I would sit my kids down to watch when they learn about that incident in Japan, just to see the similarities of how impactful it is. And then, like I said, I've watched Grave of the Fireflies, so I know I've seen a film that covers what happens afterwards. So just to see that and know what happens afterwards, it's just very beautiful on how they did that. I also really, really like old Hollywood cinema. So
Sorry.
I think that old Hollywood cinema, they have more impactful messages than cinema nowadays has. Cinema nowadays has too much, hype and everything. You don't really see messages come about. Maybe once every blue moon. Like I said before, we had Boy in the Striped Pajamas. That was very impactful cinema, and then we had a couple others. But you list off the ones from old Hollywood, there's definitely a lot more there than there are nowadays. And this is just another one of those instances, and it's really easy to see why this is a cult classic from a nerd standpoint and a historian standpoint. So it's just very well-rounded.
Cool. Yeah. I think I'm going to have a much higher score when we go back to the original, because I think that is the superior film. So I'm probably
that's the other thing is that makes me very eager because of how I view this movie. I'm very, very eager to go and watch the Japanese version with you.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. All right, Dom, what do you think?
It's hard because I'm a jaded adult whose background, like almost my whole life, has been in film. So it's really hard for me to like separate it and be like, look, this was made over 50 years ago. Film was in its infancy. They did what they could with what they had, like Star Wars.
Yeah,
I am like the biggest fan of Star Wars. I even love the original because I'm just like, okay, I get it. It was made in like the 70s, and like the lightsabers kind of sucked, so the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader is kind of weird. But when I look at Godzilla, and even through the lens of, all right, this is super old, don't give it too much crap, I still just think it's a movie that I watched because, we were going to talk about it. I think if I had gone out of my way to watch it on my own, I may not have finished it because of how goofy it is. But again, that's because I'm a jaded adult, and I'm just like, yeah, it's goofy, it looks stupid. But putting that to the side, I think it's a solid 7 out of 10. Like, when I sit down to watch a movie, I don't care about whatever undertones it's trying to preach at me or whatever, like, historical context it has. Like, I talk about that after them, If I sit down and watch a movie, I just want to, at the end of it, be like, yeah, that was a good spending of my time. And I feel like Godzilla is a good spending of my time.
All right, cool. Dennis, what did you think?
Like Dom, my life has really revolved around movies in terms of the movie industry and the cinema industry. Growing up, I grew in a household that my mom effectively shoved Star Trek: The Next Generation down my throat, and I got into Star Wars, and I shoved that down my throat myself. And so,
didn't your sister say that was her form of
it was, but we're not getting into that. That's all. That's in itself, it's funny, but going from those two things, and especially with Star Trek, with both Next Generation and the original series, you can see that they tried. But if you're looking at it as they tried with what they have, and they did good, but there's still problems that you're going to have with it. To me, Godzilla has its problems. In my opinion, they focused a little bit too much on like Steve Martin. They focused on him a little bit too much. Especially on scenes where the focus is supposed to be on Godzilla himself. And the times where he was giving narration, kind of, especially in the scene where he's narrating in the tape recorder, Godzilla in his rampage throughout Tokyo. I wish it wasn't. Give me more focus on Godzilla rampaging than a close up on Steve Marston's face just sweating.
Oh yeah, those are some pretty iconic shots though. But like, yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, give me more of. Let me see the set piece being destroyed by Teddy Bear Godzilla. Let me see googly-eyed one going, nah, fuck, destroy the buildings, like a child. Honestly, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10.
All right.
Not bad. It's not bad, but the way how they how they shot the main character in terms of the scenes that they put him in, just full on at times kind of took me out. I was like, God, why are you here? Like, I get that you're you're important in terms of you're a journalist, but you have literally no state secrets A through C. Like, even at some point, they have to pull the plug and be like, all right, go home, go to America, go.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. All right, cool. So you gave it a 6 out of 10. Very interesting. All right, Tyrell, what did you think?
I'd say I have to agree with the people who say I'm not a big fan of old-timey black and white movies myself.
That's fair.
I feel like I'll be a lot more invested when we really crack open this series, when A, there's more giant monster fights, B, we get into color. And it reminds me of when our current iteration of Godzilla, his debut movie, everybody was like, oh, Godzilla's doing like cameos in his own movie because he's hardly ever here. It's like, I feel like that was a lot closer to the old timey movies, because this was my first non-modern Godzilla.
That's very
movie.
Interesting. Yeah, well, don't worry. Shocker, most people don't know this. There are only 2 black and white Godzilla movies.
This one and the next one?
Yep, that's it. That is it. And the third one is literally Godzilla versus Kong, which is hysterical that like his third movie is when like one of the most famous matchups he's ever had was his third movie. It's crazy.
And we just got the rematch.
Oh yeah, we got the rematch 60 years in the making. So funny.
I thought there were more Godzilla versus Kong movies than that. There's only 2?
So there's the original one, which is his third film, and it's in the Showa era. Then we have to wait 60 years before the American current MonsterVerse Godzilla films have Godzilla versus Kong. And then there's... It's not technically Godzilla versus Kong, it's Godzilla X Kong, which means they're like teaming up, and then they go fight Scar King and Shimu, and I have mixed feelings about that movie. I'm so happy it made a ton of money, but I kind of like the previous one more.
But I'd say I'd give the movie 5, maybe 6 out of 10.
Okay.
I feel like I watched this movie only with other people, and I like to think that like the movie watching experience itself is like separate from the movie. But so I had a good time watching it because I was watching it with my friends. But if I was watching this movie on my own, I probably wouldn't have been paying too much attention to it. I don't know, it like the pacing was off. It is like pretty goofy. Some of the acting was like I'm not a fan of the like 50s acting, like the overreactions of everything. And like, yeah, nowadays graphically we are absolutely spoiled with what we can do, and like I get it's an old film, but just like seeing something that's supposed to be a terrifying monster and seeing it like be so goofy half the time, I could not take the horror of what was going on seriously because of that. And I think overall I'd give the movie maybe like a 5.5 out of 10. I don't regret my time watching it, but I definitely wouldn't go out of my way to watch it again.
Okay. I'm so intrigued to see what you guys think when we see the original Japanese, because I have seen both, and I do recall the original Japanese has a better story. I just I haven't seen it in such a long time that I cannot wait to see if we go back and if like there's a major improvement or if it's just the same. I'm so curious to see. So,
Can we take our scores? Can you take them and write them down somewhere?
I was literally just going
because I'd love to see, because I have a feeling my score over time getting to the newer movies might go down a bit because of how I scored this movies, and I know for a fact it's going to get higher.
I was actually
I feel like mine's gonna get higher.
I think I'm gonna
look at the boys and they're big monsters.
I think I'm gonna amend mine. Actually, I agree with Steve. I think I gave it a 7 more because we were dicking around the entire time we watched it and making fun of it. But if I was watching this by myself, I might actually like turn it off halfway through. I think I give it like a 5.5 as well. Actually, like straight up, it gets 2 extra points because I have a dude who loves this movie forcing me to watch it, and everyone else is just every 2 seconds. Oh, look at that! That looks like a bitch.
We sat down to watch the movie, and Turner's like, "Take out your notepad, start taking notes." And I felt like I was like in the middle of science class, getting ready to watch Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yeah, like
Actually,
I
I said
definitely
5, maybe. I said 5, maybe 6. I didn't even think about doing half scores. Yeah, changed my score to 5.5 too.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd say because we're so spoiled, it's like
9.5. I have a feeling that when we go to watch the full Japanese release, it's probably going to go above the 10 rating.
I think it's for me
For myself.
the biggest thing was it looks like there were things actively missing, even though they supplement that with adding their own character to it.
All right.
It felt like things were not piecing together.
Mhm.
Like there was like a little gap in between the puzzle pieces.
I think you're
What
right.
award has this movie won?
I don't really know.
But damn sure.
On Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score is 83% and a 73% from the audience score. But anyway, so Nikki, you gave it a 9.5?
Yeah, on symbolism factor.
Okay.
And because I actually am a sucker for old time Hollywood movies.
All right. Dom, you gave it a 5.5?
Yeah, I amended it to a 5.5.
Okay. And Dennis, you also say 5.5.
No, I would keep it at 6 because of,
Okay.
while you and I have some vested interest in this, not as much as you do,
Mm-hmm.
I do see the appeal of it. It's just that to me, my personal gripes with it is probably just the American version of it.
Yeah.
My score, I will actively admit, the score may change the moment I see the Japanese version.
Okay. And Tyrell, you said a 5.5 too?
Yeah.
Okay. I read
So
5.5. Okay. And
I have it won 2 awards. And I can name those awards for you if you want.
Before you do that, I'm going to ask Steve, what was yours again?
5.5.
5.5 again. Okay. And while you and I gave it a 8.
So you're gonna love the awards, one of the awards that it won, because it's primarily the reason why we're doing this. So Godzilla premiered in Nagoya in October 27th, 1954, which is what you told us at the beginning, and received a wide release in Japan on November 3rd. It was met with mixed reviews upon release, but was a box office success, winning the Japanese Movie Association Award for its best special effects. So it won its award purely because of the special effects used in this movie.
I mean, at the time, they were pretty cutting edge, so I don't doubt it.
Mm-hmm. So it didn't win 2 awards. Sorry, that was 1 award. I read that as 2. So it won Best Special Effects in the Japanese Movie Award Association Movie Awards. I don't think like Grammys or Emmys were around at that time.
On average, our score for this movie is a 6.6.
Pretty
Okay.
That's pretty good. All right, cool. I hate all of you. This is my favorite movie. I'm going to kill you all.
Oh my gosh!
I
I mean,
it.
you know,
No,
the
you
funny
get to
part,
live.
I think Nikki's
Thank
score.
you.
I think Nikki's score brought the average up by like probably a point.
Well,
She's the outlier.
well, I gave it an 8, dude. I love this movie.
yeah, but
but you're
again,
biased.
you have like
I am
a
biased.
couple. Yeah, you have a
Talking
couple of
about-
5s and then a 9, and then
What
I liked it because at the time the effects were really, really good and everything. And then I also loved it for the symbolism factor too. Like, it's a good movie. Honestly, if I was like teaching symbolism in school around the same time that they were like discussing World War II or whatever, I'd probably have my students watch this movie.
Okay.
Oh, also,
And that's
Turner.
what I plan on doing with my children, by the way. Thank you, Turner. Now my future kids will be watching Godzilla for learning purposes.
Yes.
Oh God, you're indoctrinating more.
All right. Anyway, what was it, Dom?
I'm curious what the score is without your score, Turner.
Without mine, let's find out.
I think without Nikki's is what you meant. Nikki's
No, without Turner's.
Because I'm the one who's biased because I love Godzilla. All right, so
Yeah, 'cause you have
if you take
What?
mine out, it would be. Hold on, let me do the math. Let's see. We got 9.5 plus 5.5 plus 6 plus 5.5 plus 5.5 divided by 5. What? No.
It's like you're calculating XP for D&D.
Is a 6.4, so not much different.
Okay.
it's just the one outlier being Nikki out here.
No, I mean, it's literally only like 0.3 points of a difference. I think if you took Turner and Nikki's score out, maybe it would drop like into the 5s, but
Yeah, it would be like 5.6 or something.
yeah, like 5 point something.
All right.
I mean, it is what it is.
So, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go over a little bit of trivia that I found pretty interesting about this movie. Like I mentioned before, Raymond Burr's parts apparently were all filmed in one day. So, that's pretty nuts. I found some information that claims that Godzilla weighs, the monster himself weighs 20,000 tons, which apparently is the exact same amount of TNT yield that the bombs dropped on Japan were, which I think is a very subtle
More
reference to that.
Symbolism.
More symbolism.
More symbolism.
Godzilla's roar is produced by a leather glove covered in pine tar rubbing along a double bass and then them messing around with the audio.
I would have hated to be the guy having to film that.
Despite all of the reshot American footage, the American version of this movie is 16 minutes shorter.
Wait, how did they? Oh, because they cut out stuff too, did
They cut out a lot of stuff.
That's the part I don't. That
I-
for me is what gives it the 6, of where they cut out so much. Like, you could tell that there's things missing in the movie.
Yeah.
Why does America always cut out shit they get from Japan?
I give it the rating, and I like it in spite of what America did to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Godzilla's name is a mixture of the kanji for gorilla and whale. So it's supposed
What?
to, yeah. Gojira is
What?
yeah. Gojira is gorilla whale
Why?
That really brings it into
Literally,
perspective.
why?
because he's a monster of the land and sea.
That
You've
really
never seen a
brings it
giant
into-
dinosaur before. What would you call it?
Not a
I would
gorilla whale.
probably go- I'd probably go. Shit.
There's also a rumor. Sorry.
And it also really brings into perspective knowing that that's the kanji they used when they make Godzilla versus King Kong, because King Kong is a giant ass gorilla.
Why is there not even anything about a lizard in there?
I don't know. So-
Godzilla versus Kong is just
What if he's
weakest
not a
monkey
lizard?
versus
What if he's
strongest
just a
lizard.
giant newt?
So I'm so glad that really tickled your funny bone, man.
Because if you think about it, lizards don't live in the water, newts do.
Marine iguana.
He's a
Frogzilla.
Oh my god.
So
Newtzilla.
there's a rumor that the name Gojira was the nickname of some dude who worked at Toho because the guy was just massive. But this is an unconfirmed rumor, so I don't know how true that is.
Imagine that being true, though. I would have the biggest ego known to man, and no one could stop me.
Oh, that would be really.
I have some serious beef with my coworkers. You know, you took my nickname, made fun of me, and posted it on a thing for a movie. Wait, the movie's getting success? Never mind.
Guess I'm gonna own it. So,
Continue.
like I said before, they wanted to do stop motion, but they couldn't. So this movie is a big pioneer in the whole art of suitmation. So that's a very cool thing that, like, up until Final Wars, like, Japan is like the king of making a guy in a suit. It's like they know what they're doing.
So what other like examples of suitmation exist? Because honestly, I've only ever heard of Godzilla.
So suitmation in this term is usually referring to a giant monster, because you can argue that, like, actually, I need to know, when did the Creature from the Black Lagoon come out?
Hold on. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954.
1954. So the same year Godzilla came out.
It came out February 12th, 1954. So it came out literally like 5 months before Godzilla did.
Interesting.
You want to know my own bit of trivia that I found out when looking into it?
Yeah.
I think you already know this, but Godzilla was the inspiration for Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park.
Oh. Well, all comes full circle. That's dope. Because Jurassic Park is another major reason why I love visual effects. So yeah, earlier in this podcast, we did mention that we know that the term kaiju means to a Western audience a giant monster. In reality, it means strange creature in its native Japanese context. The proper term for a giant monster is something called a daikaiju. So
Literally just add die before it.
Yeah.
Make big.
Yeah. The suit that the actor wore in the movie weighed over 200 pounds, and the actor nearly died at least twice in this suit during production. The suit, unfortunately, no longer exists because it was made out of stuff that could actually rot. The eyes of Godzilla are pointed downward, at least in the suit version, in order to help create the illusion that he is way bigger than he actually is. This is also why almost all the shots of him are from a low angle. And that's about all the trivia I could really come up with I found pretty interesting about this film. I would, again, when we go to the original Japanese, I'm going to really dig into it and get some more trivia. But yeah, my ultimate conclusion to this is that I love Godzilla. It's a huge part of my life. I'm so glad I got to watch this movie with all you. And I cannot wait to see how you people like react to as Godzilla gets forward, because this is some pretty high quality stuff at the moment. You're not going to like the next movie. So the next movie that we're going to be watching on Real Jumpers is Godzilla Raids Again, the widely considered rushed sequel to Gojira.
Here's another bit of trivia about that suit. Apparently, it reached a total of 140 degrees Fahrenheit to whoever wore it.
Oh my God, no!
Yeah, and there's apparently there's a giant suit incident that it seems to have happened, but I can't tell if it's like a creepypasta.
Are you talking about Man in the Suit?
Yeah, the guy is so obsessed.
That's a creepypasta, but it is.
Okay.
But
picture beside it's so creepy.
I find it really funny that you mentioned it, because I was going to bring that up in the next movie, because the Godzilla suit from the next movie is kind of the inspiration for the Man in the Suit creepypasta story, which I don't know a lot like of that story, but I guess I'll bring it up when we go to the next episode.
Till next time. Oh my God, 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
God, that's insane.
It says that the suit actors Nakajima and Tezuka would routinely pass out inside the suit and could only stand to be inside of it for like 5 minutes at a time.
Wow.
So, and that's according to IMDb, by the way.
Dang.
So, can't wait for the next movie.
All right, cool.
Thank you for listening.
Well, all right then. That's all for now, troopers. We've analyzed the data, we've dissected the plot, and emerged victorious. Join us next time for another sci-fi deep dive. This is Real Jumpers, signing off.